Hello, and you're very welcome to episode 11 of the fourth season of LOI Weekly. We have been sort of on 2 weeks staggered episodes of late, and we're really happy to bring you these kind of special podcasts in the middle of lockdown. You will remember we actually were a TV show, but obviously with the circumstances, we've had to change the podcast a little bit and go every 2 weeks and bring a special podcast. And I think this week we've definitely got a special podcast lined up because we have Niall Quinn, who is Ireland's second record top scorer. It obviously is the interim deputy CEO of the FAI at the moment, and it'd be fair to say Niall has definitely entered into a baptism of fire. Not only did he overtake obviously a regime that got plenty of headlines, but then he had to deal with the coronavirus implications and the implications for football, which are wrapped up in the wider implications for life itself. It's myself and Dan, as ever, we're in association with Air Sports and independent.ie. First of all, just like to welcome Niall to the show. How are you getting on, Niall?
Grand, yeah. Doing what we can. We're all in the same boat. It's a very difficult time, but yeah, getting stuck in, and a bit like now, living on these Zoom meetings and trying to get as much done as possible.
Yeah, it's kind of a bland question that we ask the guests every show at the moment. But how has lockdown been for you? Are you somebody who's suited to it, or are you somebody who's maybe struggled with it a bit?
No, I haven't struggled because there's been so much on and attending so many meetings, and whether it's in Zoom or Teams or whatever. But that's good. But also then I've found bits of time to actually have a little think about my fitness, and I've got cracking on an old hip problem that I have, and I'm sort of doing all these classes online. So funny enough, I actually feel better physically because of lockdown, because I have stopped going to restaurants and pubs till all hours of the morning, and I don't drink at home. It's not my thing. And I'm actually in good shape, feeling good about it.
Well, I suppose we have to ask then how you're feeling mentally if you're feeling okay physically, because it is a challenging time. And we want to talk about a couple of things today. We want to talk about the bigger picture of the League of Ireland and the FAI, but very naturally as well, we have a shorter term picture here, which is a big concern, which is related to the 2020 League of Ireland season. So speaking now on Wednesday, where are we with the 2020 season now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously we can't project too far ahead right now because we can't outrun government and HSE with our intent. We have to sit in behind everything they do. But part of our intent is, in two very important areas. One, medical safety for all concerned if matches are to resume. That has to be spot on, and we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes on that. In fact, we're waiting on responses now from government to questions we put to them. I suppose questions that left some sort of ambiguity in the air when the phases that were announced by our Taoiseach and what it really meant for us. And we've tried to go deeper into that. And we're told we may have some good responses to that by tomorrow, which would be good. And then we can put that into, I suppose, a bracket where we have a lot of work done in terms of how we might be able to apply a medical solution, a safe solution. And that has its origins in notes that we got and letters from clubs saying they were really scared to do that in their own grounds with their volunteers, that responsibility was huge. So we took that as a if you like, and we had a steering group on that. And we've started to get that into a good position as to how medically and safety-wise the grounds that we would select, maybe neutral grounds for any potential football, would actually operate. And that's gone quite well, and we're getting costs into that as well. Because money does come into it. So while we try and be as safe as we can for our players, for the referees, and for anybody who goes to those games officially, the reality is safety comes first. So that's a big part of what we're doing. And of course, even if that does come off, we're in a position with the financial situation as it stands right now, because for our clubs to get playing behind closed doors, it is a huge risk for them, and it is, an exposure to, in some cases, potentially having to trade recklessly. And we understand that. We have a directive from UEFA to try as hard as we can to keep the leagues operable. But we're unique here in that we've only started the season. We haven't had 3/4 of the season or 3/4 of our money that we would make in that year. We're very little money in, and I can see why the clubs reacted, some of them, the way they did at the start, that this was an awful thing. They can't see past it. And so as an FAI, we said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. How can we put a safety position in place medically if government and HSE allow us to go? And what would returning to football in the first instance behind closed doors, because we feel that's where obviously it's going to start all over Europe. What does it look like and what do the clubs need? So, that process has been going on for some time, and I think people get a little bit frustrated when they don't have a running commentary on that process. But I'll just give you an example. For instance, we would have squared off the ability to do streaming around the world with the company that have betting rights around the world and the ability to stream themselves right now. We'd have squared off with our domestic partners here, our linear TV partners. So that was done 4 weeks ago. But then 4 weeks later, there's a big article in the paper from an industry insider who says, oh, they won't be able to do that. So we are making better progress than people think. But of course, the big two questions, medical safety, etc., we're ready, we think, to put something in place there that will work if we get the go-ahead. And that go-ahead, you could boil it down to social distancing and contact. And how do the government see that on the 20th of July? And that's a big question, but that question is broken down in many ways. But for instance, if we're playing a game in the Aviva on the 20th of July and our European clubs are battling out a mini competition, if a corner is going into the box and there's 15, 16 people in the box, what does that mean? These are the questions that we want to find, clarity on, that government will say to us, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't. On the finance side, I drifted away from finances there, but on the financial side, exhausting all potential avenues, and we're being very, very creative about how we can put almost a guaranteed pot to the clubs to come back, and then perhaps have the bonus, if you like, of streaming revenue that may or may not take off. It could be something that could work brilliantly if people got behind and supported it, because we would, in effect, be the first of the big three to come back. Everybody looking quite closely at us. And if we do a good job building that up and, manage to get the go-ahead, from the players themselves in the first instance that they feel medically safe, that government allows to do this, and we put a good show on, I think it augurs well, and it stands us in good stead for two reasons. One, I think the value of having these conversations with streaming companies and understanding that market far better for the future for the League of Ireland, so we can see games around the world. And I think also then in relation for the work we'll have to do if we are to play internationals behind closed doors this year. So we're trying to keep a positivity out there, and I think our CEO Gary has said publicly, he was 2 or 3 out of 10 in terms of where this was going a couple of weeks ago. He's near a 5, 6, 7 now. I'd be a 7 man, I'm glass half full. But there is scope for the clubs to have a decision to make that will be medically 100% where it needs to be, we hope, and that financially it'll ask them the question, is it worth coming back to do it? And we also have our eye on the long term. We've spoken to a couple of sporting economists internationally, and the big fear about closing up months, guys, is how do you resurrect it and get it back off the ground again, to get it back even to where it was? And you must remember, before lockdown, we were looking at trying to improve and go forward with the league. And now there's a worry if we don't play for 9 months, we'll be starting at such a low ebb that, I suppose the people in sports economy companies that we spoke to are saying, do everything you can to get these games played and keep the brand alive. So that's a big risk going forward, and we're very, very aware of the problems. And this isn't us just doing it. We know and we understand frustrations, we understand the pain that's out there, but we are trying our best to keep something going.
There's a lot in that, Niall, and there's a few things I want to come back to. Just like you mentioned initially, like what, and it's been put to me by people involved. So what is the rationale behind, for example, the use of neutral grounds or the use of selected grounds, shall we say? Is it from a cost perspective? Is it aesthetics? And with regard to, for example, the use of stadiums, like is it to do with sort of the cost of putting, relevant health facilities in at each stadium? Or what's the thinking behind neutral grounds? As you know, for some clubs that would involve travel costs and other issues which would be a concern to them.
Well, that's right. But I suppose in the first instance, we got feedback that we asked for from the clubs, A, on the finances, and B, how they would feel about state games in their home ground. And most of them, in fact, all of them, spent most of their notes back, and maybe 50, 60, 70% of the notes back was the problems around the medical safety and how, in most cases, they asked their volunteers to be held responsible for games that were going ahead there, should they be just, given some information from HSE or ourselves and tell their volunteers to get on with it. But they felt a lot better that they weren't asking their own volunteers to be held responsible.
How many grounds are you talking about there in terms of basically are not fit for this sort of system?
Oh no, every would make fit for the system, but we're just trying to make it and look at the integrity of the competition and try and make it neutral. So if you put a team in who play there anyway and they're playing all their matches there, have they got an advantage? So we're trying to find ways of making these games take place safely with no responsibility to the clubs, and that would keep the integrity of the competition. And we had some good conversations with grounds outside of our own 19 or 20, good conversations with I think it's known now, with Aviva and others. And I think, when you start to see that side of it and see how it could operate and how games every night and perhaps 2 at weekends in the same stadium, you don't have to get the crowd in and out. You just have to get the structure of it all right and the production right. And then, of course, it feeds into a more complex issue of marketing and how we get it out there and which streaming company do we go with, for instance, if that's where we go. But I suppose getting the games on and doing enough to satisfy, the players, the referees, and to satisfy clubs themselves that they're doing the right thing playing football. That's a big task right now. And as I said at the start, we can't outrun government and HSE. We must stay in behind their orders, and rightly so. And I think, as you said earlier, Daniel, other leagues have got back sooner because the restrictions coming from their own governments and their own sort of HSEs, if you like, are allowing them to do that. Ours aren't right now, so that just happens to be the way it is. But none of us are going to knock our government for the path they've taken. They've been very good at what they've done so far.
But on the sort of practicalities of testing. There's a substantial cost, I think, potentially attached to that. Who would foot the bill for that?
So this is part of the financial certainty that we'd be hoping to create when we have the clubs. So we're hoping to have a pot of money that takes care of that. We're hoping to have a guaranteed pot of money. Would we hand the money out there and then to clubs? I'm not so sure it's going to be like that, but we may have an underwrite, if you like, that is attractive to the clubs that will pay for the medical requirements, whether that's testing, cleansing of grounds, etc., repeated cleansing of grounds and new games coming in, etc. So there's a big body of work gone into that, and there is a cost, and we have the guts of that cost now. We're nearly ready to go to clubs to show them that. But of course, there's no point just going to clubs with bad news about cost. We have to have money coming in as well. So we're pretty confident that we will have an amount that will get people thinking seriously about coming back. And then, of course, if streaming does work and that starts to eat into the problem and make things better for clubs, then that's great. But we wouldn't be going to the clubs saying, we're going to tell you to take a big risk now on streaming, and if it comes in, if it doesn't, we're all in trouble. That's not going to be the way. We're going to have to put something up on to give clubs for this the right.
And that's a big thing, isn't it, as well? Because you said pretty confident there, and like so many people are just looking for some sort of clarity. So where is the confidence coming from? And can you elaborate on how this money might come together? Because obviously everyone's in stuck at the moment.
Yeah, as I said, we're being creative, but what I don't want to do is jeopardize it and put pressure on the areas where we think money will come from. And the reason I say that, guys, is everybody is looking at government and HSE to see when we can go back. We're putting stuff together around, I suppose, a creative input of finance into the league for this moment in time. But what I can say is we're having some very fruitful conversations with interested parties, and we're looking at having a meaningful sum on the table when we get everything together and we know that we have HSE's backing to go for it at a particular day.
But is increased state support a part of this, Niall, or maybe some security around the wage subsidy scheme, which is obviously at the moment is quite an important thing? Because I know FIFA had been mentioned, but there's maybe might be suggestion the timelines on FIFA may not be immediate. So where I know I appreciate you can't tell us maybe where money is coming from, but are these elements in it, state support and FIFA?
Well, you were looking at everything, Daniel, and if the state support scheme carries on, then that would be great, and obviously that makes it somewhat easier than if it stopped. But at the same time, then you would say, is it worth it for government to create a bigger dole queue for our players, or is it better to have them playing football, keeping our industry alive, and keeping the support scheme in place? Now, I wouldn't go too deep into that, but obviously it would make it better for us if the support scheme was alive and well, and we knew it would be for the duration of any games.
So you're hoping to maybe go to clubs with information next week, I gather. Like, what type of...
I was glad you said you gather. It was good to hear that from you this morning. We're going to go as quickly as we can, Daniel. And I think if government are responsive tomorrow and we get some good depth analysis from the responses that we're looking for, and we can start to bring the clubs in a little bit nearer to where we're going, all right, and fully understand their frustration and fully understand the negativity that was around at the start of all this. But we've kept our heads down, and we think we will have something for them to say no to, and again, all dependent.
What type of majority do you need, though? Like, what?
No idea. I've no idea. It's such an unusual circumstance. In NLEC meetings and with the league meetings, rather than have that argument.
Just to clarify as well, you mentioned earlier, because one of the points that's been mentioned about streaming, I know you're saying that maybe streaming may not necessarily be funding this, it might be something of a bonus, but you do have deals with RTE, with Air Sport, with Track Champ. Are you suggesting that it's been cleared with them that you have the facility to stream independently?
So there's two types of streaming. There's domestic and international, and already, we have to sort of make sure that we carry out our domestic duty, which is an amount of games that RTE and Air are allowed carry. But there's an awful lot more games than that we can show domestically as well. But that's the domestic market. But the international market is there for us. Now, what does that mean? It's a big place. More so marketeers, for digital strategist marketeers, and how we could get this to start to make and pay dividends around the world. And it's interesting talking to them. So that's all available to us. So if you think about it, I think RTE have about 15 games, maybe 25 games in total. I don't know how many they showed up to now. Air have some games as well. But if you add up the amount of games between both leagues that would play, for instance, in an 18 or 27 game league, there's 100 in one scenario and over 200 in another. So we go domestically to also honour our contracts to Air and RTE and show football, and I think they'll be delighted with that. And we've got a full range of the globe to go for with the international domestic. And as I said, earlier, that's been a really interesting conversation, because it starts to make you look and know more about what could be happening next year, the year after, etc. So this might just be a gateway to a better position internationally on our streaming ability.
I guess on the streaming, though, I know the only thing that matters about anything really is the now, in terms of getting the season up and running as best we can. What is the potential for streaming? I mean, we've seen games like from Korea and, that have attracted huge viewing online. There might not be that much going on this summer, but clubs seem to be extremely sceptical that there would be any kind of real hunger for this. And will it bring in any money for them at all, potentially?
Well, there you go. So I think we have about 11 or 12,000 diehard fans in the League of Ireland who make up the majority of the attendances a week. And, taking into a majority of them to support their club and give them a package to watch every game that their club plays, we'll see, could they come to the table on that? We also have, lots of data where we have, Republic of Ireland football fans, far more in greater number. And this is their time to come and help the cause, and we would be marketing to that audience. And then when you start to look internationally then at the diaspora, now also there's other sports lovers, around that we would hope would think about this as well. Bearing in mind that GAA and rugby will probably benefit from where it starts and where it goes, and could possibly follow us on. So that's a starter at home, if you like. But then when you look at the way the digital strategists around the world tap into the various markets, and the Irish diaspora market around the world, it can be contacted quite easily. Will they, stand up for the cause? That's a big question. And I suppose in talking to streaming companies who are telling us that this is all available, one of the things we want to do is say, okay, put your money where your mouth is. Where will you go to say you'll give our clubs a guarantee on an amount? So these are the kind of questions that we're having, and so it's starting to form the basis of something positive.
So Track Champ's not an issue then, you're saying? That's not an obstacle to international?
Track Champ have the rights to the betting screening, if you like, or streaming. So in other words, for bookmakers to have it on their on their websites or whatever. So that's where they come in. But to actually go and stream behind a paywall for the games only, we're absolutely within our rights to do that.
That's an interesting point, though. So betting then would have to be through TrackChamp on that. Betting potential.
No, TrackChamp aren't a bookmaker. They just provide the pitches for betting companies to form betting markets, and so that'll carry on. But separately, we'll be asking non-bettors around the world to. That's what we do, of course. If the clubs do it, we'll be asking them to see can they come to our aid.
Just a couple of more things on this. There was a couple of tweets from Stuart Gilhooly, the PFAI solicitor, last weekend, pointing out, and I touched on this in the piece today, that we are in a situation with, if the health officials give us the okay to play, but clubs then vote not to proceed because they're not satisfied with the financial package, are you fearful what might happen with players and with player contracts? If the health authorities are okay to play and we say no because we're not satisfied with the package, then what are we potentially facing into?
Well, at the far end of that, we would worry that in 9 months' time, trying to get the league back off the ground again would be very difficult. But, if you look closer to now, if that was the way the clubs end up having to go, it's an unwelcome problem between the club and their contracted players. And I think we'll have some very difficult conversations. And I believe the brand will suffer immeasurably. These are the things that we, as an FAI group, decided that, look, we must do everything we can to prevent this happening. I don't want to go too deep and be negative about where it could go, but it's pretty obvious, Stuart Gilhooly is talking sense there. We've got to do everything we possibly can to get this show back on the road. The alternative, it's just awful for our players. And remember, the players are the stars of the show. And we've had the PFAI on literally every 2 days in our working group with the NLEC and the referees as well, I might add, to just try and keep people abreast and keep players advised that we are going where we can. And I take your point, we're behind the other European countries, but we're also behind the government and HSE, and they are being more cautious than other countries, and that's fine. We respect it. We never knock government for that, but we can't outrun them at this point. We can only build up and get ourselves ready as best we can. So to answer your question, I really hope football is played again. I hope the league continues. I think it will do the league a great service going forward if we were the first of the big sports to come back, and despite all the difficulties that we found a way to do it, and the game could rejoice in that, as opposed to taking the option of let's try and build a brand and take it off the ground again next February when players' contracts have been completely thrown up in the air.
Will there be a risk, though, in what clubs have to decide on here? Because it all comes back to this guaranteed pot, ultimately, because I've spoken to people in clubs who are very worried that they operate off door-to-door fundraising and people coming into their games. And look at the statistics. Around Europe, we have a huge reliance on match day income. This is I appreciate it's something you've inherited, but this is our state of play here. So are you ultimately going to be asking the clubs who are most skeptical about this to take some kind of leap to believe, or do you hope that this guaranteed pot you can somehow pull together minimises that risk considerably?
If we can't cancel the risk totally with the minimum pot that we'll guarantee, we would hope that the view would be taken that, and we'll show where we'd have to be on streaming to get to that point, and I haven't got the numbers now, I couldn't even go into that with you, that would be enough for them to say, yeah, come on, let's rally around and go for it. I mean, that's a fair question that you asked, Daniel, and I think it would be a shame for this to break down on an amount that would have come in easily by streaming. So we just have to, view all those obstacles really, and try and flatten out the curves as much and the hills as much as we can, on the basis that it is the best thing if football carries on. UEFA will look on us more favourably for doing it. I think government will, but we need a little bit of help everywhere, and that help is starting to show itself, and we're confident we will have something.
Okay, just sort of a slight point of order as such as well, that you have obviously some clubs at the moment who've laid off players versus some clubs that continue to pay players. And this is a talking point because clubs have laid players off. You would think under licensing that they still owe money to those players going forward, and is this another complication that some clubs have continued to pay and some clubs haven't? And there's the feeling that is there a situation that those clubs who haven't paid now could be gaining an advantage in some shape or form? Is this part of the equation?
Yeah, I think that's a question for the clubs to work out themselves when they come back together. That's what the NLEC is for, is to come and obviously unity is the big key here. And obviously clubs have had to do what they've had to do, and we totally understand when Sligo Rovers went and St Patrick's Athletic went. We understood, and then Waterford and Cork came in. And the 4 clubs who qualified for Europe were holding firm, and then the other couple of clubs as well, all showing concerns, and we get that. And then you have the 9 other clubs in the first division, and so we've listened to everybody. We really have, Daniel, and we're seeing where people are, and we kind of understand their pain. And so just go back to your first point there about crowds coming in the gate, and we rely on that. Effectively, we're trying to replace the gate. Okay, and then you have a medical bill on top. Okay, and how many games do you play? Is it a full season? Is it a restricted number of games? But what is it that gets us there, that gives us the title winners at the end and the qualifiers for Europe at the end of the season? That's the place we want to be. We're not certain. There's still question marks, but to find comfort with the clubs that we might not be where the gate and where the medical is, but would they take a leap to go for it if that gap isn't too bad? That's probably a way of looking at it, Daniel, and that would then bring the players back in. If the clubs go for it, would bring the players back in. Now it goes into a little bit of a minefield, because I'm not got the answer of what the decision-making formula is like for the clubs, but it will be the clubs and unity required to do this.
Just finally, the first division clubs. Sorry, Dan. Where do the first division clubs fans come in on this? And where you mentioned the NLAC, and a lot of obviously first division clubs and fans feel that they're probably a bit left out of the process, and are obviously skeptical about streaming and all that as well. No, they're totally in the process, and funny enough, UEFA said to us that we could call off that league if we wanted to, but we'd have to go back to them for permission if the clubs don't accept it in the Premier League. But that was never in our thinking. We think the first division clubs and the League of Ireland brand is just as important, and they would be part of the process going forward. What's in their favour is they don't need as much finance surety. Would they nearly be happy with the first division clubs? Nearly be happy with the season being canned? No, I think they all want to play. They had a meeting. What are we on now? I think on Monday, and they wrote to us to say that all of us are going to do everything we can to help you to get back behind closed doors, which was great. And as I say, it's not as difficult for them in terms of a number that has to be reached to satisfy them, because they don't have the costs of some of the bigger clubs in the Premier League. We recognise that, but it was also good of them to come and say, look, keep doing. The message for them was keep going for it. We're here, and we'd like to show our unity to say we're right behind you. That was good, and we will endeavour to make sure that they feel comfortable with it going forward just as much as the clubs. Just finally in this, before we move on to general stuff, is spectators returning to stadiums this year completely off the agenda, or is one of the questions to government to do with this safe spectating figure? The roadmap. I see Basketball Ireland speaking today about what they might be doing. They make reference to the roadmap and limited spectators. Are you still looking to establish that you could have a small number of fans, even if it's just 500? Because as you know, in some clubs that could mean a lot. Yeah, and wouldn't it be lovely if we were back playing and we were able to bring our fans back and we had a streaming income? That would be the best position to be. But again, we can't outrun the government on that, but we can plan. But that's not something you can sort of put down and say, it's going to happen, so you'll get money out of that. Again, it's bonus territory if it happens. But again, the questions that we sent up to government that we're awaiting response on would include, how do they envisage fans coming back into stadium? It looks as if it will start behind closed doors. Where do they feel at this point is the safe place, or is it possible to even tell us that? And if it's something that we just have to play along with and work out later on in the event, wouldn't it be great if we were playing our games, we were up and running, we had our streaming revenue, we had our guarantee that the clubs liked, and then fans were allowed to come back in small numbers maybe at first, but that would be something. Something else. I think we might all look and feel bad that we didn't persevere if suddenly in October we could do that, and the league was sitting dead, and our brand was in trouble then to try and resurrect it out of the ashes. So when are you looking to decide ultimately? When do we need to know?
government's answers and responses will be important at this point, and then we kind of have all our cost silos to come together on that. We'll mix in both are very important areas. Obviously, the safety, medical safety is absolutely paramount. Cost of that, cost of clubs. Who's with us? As we attempt to get creative to bring people to give the underwrite, if you like, that will make this happen, and pile them all together as quickly as we can, and be able to go to the clubs with some form of roadmap that would see, some surety about getting their players back training. Even, I know that the European clubs and those who are still paying their players are kind of thinking about that slightly different.
The general picture in the League of Ireland now, then, I mean, to hopefully we can all get past this in some shape or form, and however it plays itself out. But I guess this debate has probably exposed one of the issues I would feel about the League of Ireland is you do have quite a degree of inequality within the league. You have professional clubs who want certain things. You have part-time clubs with different needs. You have clubs in the first division at amateur level. How do you fuse this all together in terms of looking at the strategy? Because I know there's a steering group that's now meeting, it's reconvened to look at broader issues. So how do you sum up the picture at the moment?
Well, actually, the group that has come back together is every club. So we've had 19 representatives at those meetings every Thursday. And that's been really interesting because, at the start, there was bits of anger in the air about the way, obviously, the FAI had treated the league in the past, and we accepted that. But we also accepted that a participation agreement between us going forward, to create a new league, that it could be achieved together if we show unity, if we, which we admitted, dial back on the fact that the agreement up to now is heavily weighted in favour of the FAI, that the clubs should be getting more out of it, but that we would protect certain I suppose, criteria in going forward, that academies were protected, that women's football was given the exposure nationally that it needs to be amongst the League of Ireland clubs. There's a number of things, and that, that clubs would sign up to a plan that would eventually see better facilities, to at least come as one in our attempt to make our stadiums better. There's a number of things, that I could go into there, but essentially that, that we didn't just see a group within the club saying we want to go a particular way, others want to go another. We think they themselves where they want to go as a group in lots of areas, but we just like to protect sort of, I suppose, I think the vulnerable areas it's vital that we protect the vulnerable areas. That in some leagues that got their own way in Europe, things deteriorate off on its own. I suppose fulfilling their own futures and how that looks commercially, how that looks competition-wise, what way does the league structure, and who will sign to those criteria that include top-class academies at every club, that includes women's football at every club, and in terms of the academies that the boys and girls are making their way to up that elite ladder. And so how that mixes back in with grassroots is also very important to us, because we think that wasn't done very well, the launch of the national leagues. We think there's some engagement to be done there that will make hopefully life better for all concerned. And in general, we'd be hoping that the clubs would sign up to I suppose, a future and the participation agreement with terms of reference that would take that into account, but then they would have a big say in how they go forward themselves. And I think that's how you get unity.
You mentioned the national underage leagues, and that's significant because it hasn't always been mentioned in some of the debates around the future of the league, where they stand, and it keeps coming back to me from people at queries. So obviously, we have the 13s, 15s, 17s, 19s at the moment. Is this something you envisage staying in place going forward? Is there changes to how it operates? And also, there is a question that's around there. Is Ruud Dokter staying? Is he still part of this vision going forward?
In an ideal world, we will have 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 17s, 18s. We'll break that. But what we will also have is a fairer system. Now, and I say, I'm not even so sure it would start at 13, because we really need to bring this relationship between grassroots and elite football back. There needs to be a proper domestic compensation agreement for feeder clubs whose players go into the National League. And we want to get to a point where our schoolboy clubs around the country are proud that they're associated with a League of Ireland club, not just the privileged few, and that clubs know then that when one of their players gets picked to go into an academy, that they are in line to be compensated for having brought the player to that point. That's a structure that takes place in many other countries. We're not inventing the wheel there. But of course, the way the National League was introduced, it wasn't great. Okay, let's put it that way. So there's a re-engagement there, and we have to build up trust again. And when you speak to groups like the Schoolboys, the FAI, the SFAI, and others, and there's definitely resentment in the air about the way that whole thing took off. And so that has to be repaired. And we need to have both sides understand that it must be done better. And we think that's a very important part of the League of Ireland going forward, that what we're trying to do at the top end of it to make, the stadiums better, to give better, even for the players, I should mention the players, to get players in 52-week contracts as requisite. That kind of stuff. But if that comes in, that at the other end of the scale, that we're also got League of Ireland clubs who have a relationship now with grassroots football, and that we have a system in play. And then the elite ones from that go into our international areas, so under 15, 16, 17s, etc. And a future and identity being built. And just to finish it off, and that end of it is what Ruud Dokter has spent most of his time on, Daniel, to this point. And I think it's fair to say, when we went in there late January, February, and we started having conversations, Gary and I was particularly interested, obviously, in the football development and how everything was going. Very quickly, I saw that our underage teams were doing quite well. We're very well ranked, from under 17 upwards. Our under 21s have really come good, as you know. And although we didn't know how long it would take, we knew Stephen Kenny was coming at some stage. We were hoping it was after the Euros that we were also building up to. And we were just feeling our way and finding our way through what was there, what has Ruud built up, and what were the traits of that make it stand out, and is it good enough to say that it would be able to help us create our own identity as a footballing nation in our own right. And I think when I looked then and Stephen got the job, I was actually delighted. Nobody told Stephen Kenny what to say, by the way. He didn't have a big sort of PR team around him. He went up in his house. He said a fabulous thing that really resonated with me, and that was, if every schoolboy and schoolgirl team in the country wants to play like the Irish team, that will be success. And that was it. And I was really, like, the hairs went up on my neck when I heard that. I went, that's exactly what we want. And so
does that resonate with government, that the government has massively let this country down in terms of football? We've no academies, we've no football industry whatsoever in this country, despite the fact it's pretty much our most important participation sport. It's obviously been mentioned that horse racing has had a favourable relationship with government. Where is football? Have you any confidence from, I know we've a fractured government at the moment, have you any confidence from within that they have some idea of how much, not only the old FAI, to my mind, but the government failed football in this country, and how much that needs to change, including the League of Ireland?
Yeah, well, we have to remember they helped us out brilliantly at the end of January, so we have to, fair is fair, because we, as you know, the association of football in this country was in it. But I think going forward, that's about a relationship that they could have trust in what we're doing. And there's governance reforms. Now, that's not my bag, but the governance reforms that are being suggested, I know some committees were put together and people are unhappy that those committees haven't sat. But in January, the association as it is now agreed by signing MOU to alter that, and that's what's happened in EGM. So it's a little bit tricky, and that's complex. And it's not my bag, thankfully, but I don't want to go too deep into it. But government and the FAI, we need a better relationship going forward. We could start to a good start regardless of who goes in there. I think the Department of Sport feels happier with us right now. I hope Sport Ireland do too. It feels that way. Before I was part of the FAI in this interim role, I did speak a lot about the fact that, in betting, I love horse racing, I love greyhound racing, but a lot of people are betting on football. And I don't buy the argument that it's football in Europe or football in England, because a lot of people in Ireland bet on horse racing every day. So I'm really hopeful that somewhere along the line, the ability for us to improve our stadiums is just as important as greyhound racing and the horse racing's desire and need to upgrade their facilities, which they've all done. I mean, the Curragh's had a brilliant makeover there, and our grounds need that too. So it's about, proving that we're a capable organisation, that our governance is good, that our finances are in place, that our reporting and our auditing structure is good. And just on that, had an email, our procurement office hasn't. That doesn't mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to those looking for change, because what that means is if I want to buy I've got to go to the procurement office and let them know what I'm doing. And it really does sort of tighten up where our spend will go in the future. And I think it's a big change. It's a change to the culture, because most people will know that there wasn't really a system in place. And those are things that and the governance that will come. The international stuff feels good. The League of Ireland, there's a lot of work to do, but we're delighted to be doing it. The grassroots, I've already reported to our board about changes that can really help and benefit grassroots around the country. High Performance have been in, who link the two. So there's lots of good things, guys, there. And we want to go back to government with that. We want to show that our brand is coming out of the old ways. I think that's if Gary and I would say what's success in this period of time that we've been put in interim, that all of those areas that I spoke to are on the move.
So just to clarify, Ruud Dokter is staying beyond this summer.
I'm not privy to that now. I read in the paper there was a contract offered, and Gary Holmes rang me and said, "Did you talk about that?" I don't know anything about that. So I think there's a conversation there. And I think that conversation started before we got there, and we've had a good look at it. I don't see any reason to put a big red flag up, but I do think there's a process to be fulfilled yet.
We are coming towards the end, so I'm just conscious of getting some quick answers and quick questions, I guess. That you mentioned the jobs that are at hand and the tensions that have existed between, say, the schoolboy football towards the underage leagues. Are you confident, because there have been a lot of messages from the FAI that the League of Ireland is very big going forward in the role of the association. Are you confident that the other areas of the game support that?
So they're quite worried at the moment, because all the talk and all the media has been around League of Ireland, and they feel they don't get their share. But I can assure them, they are very much on the radar. The simple base grassroots message is, we have targeted as the number one area within our business to restructure and to make better. Jerry McDermott and the team in there are doing very, very well. Thomas Shea's been out ill, and we've right around put them really good together. So I'll give you an example. We spoke about revitalising and sending stuff around the country, and the home skills project, and we spoke about getting our players and coaches maybe to help kids out at home with skills. And lo and behold, the SFAI had done one, fair play to them. It was really, really good. And we said we'd wait for that to end and then we'd be on. And we said if we could get 10,000, and we brought the SFAI into it, by the way. And we said if we could get 10,000 views from young people in the first month, wouldn't that be something? We got 300,000 in 3 weeks. And that shows you, that we have something good to offer to grassroots. It's just a snapshot. But where it really needs to go, and to get deeper into your question, Daniel, is the relationship between high performance, elite football, the grassroots, and that point where national leagues take players to the next level. That has to be really repaired, and engagement has to go on, and all parties have to be happy to move forward, because it's just as important that we have that right and repaired, and we have proper structures in the National League than it is to have big crowds coming through at the top. And we won't allow that that relationship to worsen. And I get your point. Some of them are very happy with Dokter because it means that everything was here at the National League and we get that. But we do also think that with engagement, with policy, I personally would love to see embedded in grassroots, but it became more relevant, more important to our game, that more emphasis was put on it, that more money was given to it. And we're looking at ways of doing that, being creative for schoolboy and schoolgirl football in this country. I suppose I'll finish on that by just saying to you, I have a few things personally, and look, the committee and all sorts to put me on my box. But I think we'll probably have 19, 20 teams if Limerick were to come back at some stage. If we had 20 teams and we have 1,000 schoolboy clubs, why should 10 or 12 of those clubs have a privilege of being linked to a League of Ireland club? Why have those clubs gotten to be linked to that elite program, but also have the ability from our coaches and our RDOs as part of our service go in and train them the exact same way that Stephen Kenny is training them?
Where do we stand on the All-Ireland League, Niall? This is obviously a a massive talking point, and there has been suggestions that the FAI and the IFA have set up a steering group to discuss it, or where do we stand with this at the moment?
Yeah, well first of all, that's not the case, and it was mentioned in one of our first meetings with the 19 clubs that it might be a thing to aim for, on the All-Ireland League, because we look at it, we like the work that's been put in, all of us do, in there, and it's about practicalities and understanding how it would work and starting to build relationships with other stakeholders. So it was suggested at that meeting that one way might be to set a steering group, but let's not go too far with that. Next day in the paper, it's steering group has been set up between the FA. So the answer is no. You've gone a bit too far there, Daniel. It is in the pipeline, but I suppose on Kieran Lucid's All-Ireland League proposals, we like them. We like. I think it's been well documented that we don't see it as standing in the way of anything that we see as progress for the league, and we think we can certainly investigate it further and be open to the clubs to say, you guys really have to look at this closely, and we'll help you every way we can, and we won't stand in your way if you want to go down this path. But we obviously want to be involved to protect the young talent that we have and the structures that would see schoolboys and schoolgirls and women's football should benefit.
It's a broad base. I mean, I guess, do you see the FAI having a role in whatever happens with the League of Ireland? Because before you came in, there was a suggestion of like a breakaway or a hybrid company or whatever it might be. But it does seem from discussions that you're seeing the FAI is very much, as an overseer of what's happening. So is this your vision for it now?
No, we're actually following guidelines from UEFA really on that, and FIFA. And FIFA have spoken about the certain countries that leagues have broken away and problems that resulted. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to give the league clubs, as much of a say and as much of control without putting certain constituents at risk. And we just want to be there to protect as this hopefully new dawn of Irish football takes place once the pandemic ends. And I think government appreciate that as well, and they like that we're there. So a lot of stakeholders would be happy to see us in and around it and to be protective. But I do think there's some good energy in the League of Ireland clubs now. There seems to be new people have come in, and there's a greater desire to get the maximum value, and we just want to assist that. But as I said, and not to say the clubs would forget about all the other things, but it's just insurance for us that we're going to make the measure, as you say. But let's see how that works out, because the start of, I suppose, a participation agreement, a different participation agreement was ever in place before, and the clubs need to get some confidence from that. And if we can agree that position, hopefully the sooner the better. And we all know what we're doing next season. I think that's a great starting point to build a plan whereby we can start to introduce academies, as we said, links to grassroots, better links, a better harmony between the two, women's football coming into play, and ultimately facilities improving and government understanding the need to do that. Sorry, I never really answered your question on that. But I'll leave you one thing now, right? You mightn't put this in the podcast, but some tough days there, and there's a lot of stuff going on, as you know. The best day I had was in Darndale, and why was that? I went to see the night leagues that the Darndale Gardaí on the beat organised with young people in Darndale, and they play leagues at night time, and the crime rate drops to zero every time the night leagues take place. And I went out to see them, and the people in charge told me that in Darndale they've had money for everything, every kind of a sport, every kind of a thing. The only thing that works is football. And that's the power of football. And that's the message I want government to hear, and that they have trust in an association that will have football clubs, as well as looking after their players, as well as the academies, as well as the girls, as well as women, that they will have community involvement, that they will have make themselves a pillar in the community. And that will enhance everything they do. I was sick talking about Sunderland. I'm not going to do that. Speak to Dan Lambert at Bohemians. Let him tell you the value of being a presence in the community, as opposed to being a League of Ireland club trying to win trophies. And then you'll see what this FAI is about.
Yeah, thanks a million for that, Niall. I think we can all attest to that, and the fact that the clubs have done so much in the communities, and sadly that was really taken off just before this all kicked in. But listen, thanks a million for your time, and we'll hope to have you on soon as well, hopefully when the league starts to kick off again.
Great, so
Thanks,
thanks.
Niall.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thanks, Niall.
Bye.